the vast majority of the work that we do is employment related under the general employment policy. So, the tests for approval for an employment visa I've couched as the employment visa approvability test. And the approvability test is that the applicant needs to possess special skills, knowledge and experience of value to and not readily available in Hong Kong, but not China. And moreover, the employer must be justified in engaging the services of an expatriate as opposed to the services of a local person. Now, the employment visa is administered under the general employment policy. And to be deemed a professional under the employment policy, to pass this test, at a very minimum, you need to be a graduate and have 2 years post-graduation working experience in a managerial or supervisory capacity. If you are not a graduate, then really the Immigration Department are expecting to see 10 years experience in a managerial or supervisory capacity. However, because there's so much flexibility in the way that the Immigration Department implement policy, you can, on occasion, find situations that fall between those two polarities, and you can argue it accordingly and be successful. And let me give you a simple example of how that worked many, many years ago for me. I had a 18-year-old junior high school graduate who was working for his father's farm in Japan. And what they did was they grew eels. They were eel farmers. And his father's business was associated with some Japanese consortium that had some very interesting eel farming technology. And they'd done some licensing deal with an enterprise in Shenzhen. And the farms were all in Shenzhen. But the operational control of this joint venture was based in Hong Kong. And they wanted to have this kid come to Hong Kong and be responsible for this venture. And you think he's 18 years of age. What's all that about? So I said to the client, I said, look, you're just simply not going to get approved under any circumstances unless you've got something really, really unusual about you. So tell me about the business of eel farming. So I discovered that actually, if you know anything about chicken sexing, does anybody know anything about chicken sexing? When you are, I'll just digress for a moment. When chickens are born in an industrial sort of facility, the chicks are taken out of the hatching trays and then they're put onto little conveyor belts. And then there are people that stand at each side of the conveyor belt and they pick up the chick. And when they pick up the chick, they have an intuitive sense of whether that chick is a boy or a girl. Because you can't tell, right? There's nothing to look at. And then they separate them, and then the males apparently go off for eating, and the girls go off for hatching, giving more eggs out. So there's an intrinsic sort of, skill, if you will, about chicken sexing. What transpires that in the world of eel farming, there's an intrinsic skill that's very similar, and that is that you can pick up a batch of newly hatched chicks. It's not chicks, eels, whatever, the baby eels. And that depending on how briskly they flip their tail, I kid you not, then you can tell whether or not they stand the chance of being grown to sort of full size for harvesting. And if they're genetically weak, they'll never get to that size, so they can the batch. And apparently this kid had that skill. So this was pre-internet now that I remember, I went off and did all the research on this, and apparently it's completely true. So we made the argument, and lo and behold, the Immigration Department said yes to him. Now there's a caveat to this, because about 7 or 8 years ago, I was giving a talk on behalf of the Institute of Human Resources Management here, and the Immigration Department actually asked if it would be okay for some senior officers to come in to listen to what I had to say. And I told the story to that audience at that time, and afterwards, one of the officers came up to me and he said, I remember that case, I was on that team, and he said he was always going to get approved because he has special human talent. Human capital. So there you go. The approvability test calls for special skills, knowledge and experience of value to are not readily available in Hong Kong. Normally we're looking for, a university graduation. and normally some working experience in the wake of that. But you can, on occasion, have a very set of circumstances that's going to give you the opportunity to make your client smile when the visa comes in. So that was one of my more notable approvals down the years.